Krishna's favorite food. Butter, that's right. Everyone's a winner tonight. So we're going to hear a verse from Queen Kunti where she talks about how Krishna steals butter. What's Krishna's name? Makkanchor, 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 Makkanchor. And the verse from Queen Kunti, what number is it? This verse talks about how Krishna's mother's name is?
Devaki.
Did she chase him?
Yes.
A lot. He ran away a lot. But this one particular day, when there was milk on the stove, and Yashoda put Krishna down, she was breastfeeding him, and then she had to attend to her duties, and they were all for Krishna, but Krishna became angry. He picked up a rock, he broke the butter pot, and with false tears in his eyes, he started to eat the butter and give it to the monkeys. And when his mother came back, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the controller of all, out of fear ran away from his mother. What's the number? 31? Let's read a verse from the beautiful Srimad Bhagavatam, and Queen Kunti is singing this prayer. 1831. That was it. We had it. No? 31. Go pyadede tvai kritagasi damatavad yate dashashukali lanjana sambramaksham vaktram naniya bhava bhavana yastitasya samam bimohayati bhirapi yadbibheti. Okay, everyone, we can sing it all together. Ready, everyone? Gopyadede tvai kritagasi damatavad yate dashashukali lanjana sambramaksham vaktram naniya bhava bhavana yastitasya samam vimohayati bhirapi yadbibheti. And here's the translation. And when we finish this translation, then we're going to sing a song from the Padma Purana, which is usually sung in Kartik. But since in Vrindavan all the seasons merge together into one, we're going to sing it tonight, the Sri Damodar Ashtakam. Let's read it together, number 31. Ready? My dear Krishna, Yashoda took up a rope to bind you when you committed an offense, and your perturbed eyes overflooded with tears, which washed the mascara from your eyes. And you were afraid, though fear personified is afraid of you. This sight is bewildering to me. And now a beautiful song from the Shastra, which describes this pastime. We can all enter into Vrindavan through the window of this beautiful song from the Padma Purana. Would everyone like to try it? Let me count how many said yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Everyone else you're going to have, we'll pass out earplugs. And you can cover your eyes. Okay, here we go. We'll try it. Kirtan's just coming, just now. But another kind of kirtan is to hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now that it's slowing down just a little bit, we're going to take a few minutes to hear from the summary of the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, The Appearance of Lord Krishna. And we're going to put it up on the screen, starting with the first chapter. And just take a few minutes to listen to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. O self-illuminated one, the great saintly persons who have crossed over the ocean of nescience by the help of the transcendental boat of your lotus feet have not taken away that boat. It is still lying on this side. If one takes a boat to cross over a river, the boat also goes with one to the other side of the river. And so, when one reaches the destination, how can the same boat be available to those who are still on this side? To answer this difficulty, the demigods say in their prayer that the boat of the Lord's lotus feet is not taken away. The devotees still remaining on this side are able to pass over the ocean of material nature because the pure devotees do not take the boat with them when they cross over. When one simply approaches the boat, the whole ocean of material nescience is reduced to the size of the water in a calf's hoofprint. Therefore, the devotees do not need to take the boat to the other side. They simply cross the ocean immediately. Because the great saintly persons are compassionate toward all conditioned souls, the boat is still lying on this side. In other words, one can meditate upon the lotus feet of the Lord at any time, and by so doing, one can cross over the great ocean of material existence. Meditation means concentration upon the lotus feet of the Lord. Lotus feet indicate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But those who are impersonalists do not recognize the lotus feet of the Lord, and therefore their object of meditation is something impersonal. The demigods express their mature verdict that persons who are interested in meditating on something void or impersonal cannot cross over the ocean of nescience. Such persons are simply imagining that they have become liberated. O lotus-eyed Lord, their intelligence is contaminated because they fail to meditate upon the lotus feet of your Lordship. As a result of this neglectful activity, the impersonalists fall down again into their material way of conditioned life. Although they may temporarily rise to the point of impersonal realization, impersonalists undergo severe austerities and penances to merge themselves into the Brahman effulgence, or impersonal Brahman existence. But their minds are not free from material contamination. They have simply tried to negate the material ways of thinking. That does not mean that they have become liberated. Thus they fall down. Does anyone know these verses? The first one was Tvayam bujaksha kila satvadamni samadhira veshatateta saike Vatpada potena mahatkritena kurvanti govatsabadam bhavabdyam. That says, Tvayam bujaksha kila satvadamni, that the ultimate object of meditation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that one should give one's full attention. This is something also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, second chapter. Sutta Goswami says, Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati shrotavya kirtitavyasya dyeya pujascha nityada. Tasmad means therefore. Ekena manasa means one-minded. Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati. Speaking about the Lord, He's the pati for the sattvatas, the devotees. Shrotavya means that should hear about Krishna. Kirtitavyas, chant about Krishna. Cha, dhyeya, meditate. Pujas, you should worship. Chanityada, and how often should you do it? Always, or at least every day. Because the acharyas say that if you tell those who are on the threshold of devotional service that you should do this all the time, they may say, I can't do it all the time because I have other engagements. Therefore they say that nityada, always, means at least something every day. Don't neglect to do your spiritual practice to hear or to worship Krishna, chant about Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vyavasayatmika bhudir ekiha kurunandana bahushaka hyanantashta buddhayo vyavasayinam. And that means that those who don't have this focus on Krishna have an intelligence that's many-branched. Bahu Shaka. Shaka means branches and Bahu means unlimited. Bahu Shaka hi anantas. Anantas means unlimited, actually. So, one, through association with devotees and by the practice of devotional service, can become vyavasayatmika bhutir. Intelligence can become fixed. And in that verse, which is a famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada had taken from the commentary of one of our acharyas that the way to stay focused on Krishna is to stay focused on serving Krishna. And the way to receive service from Krishna is to receive some service from one's spiritual master. So Prabhupada took that as his mainstay in devotional service, that he had received an order from his guru, and he stuck to it always. And he said that was the source of his success. So in these prayers by the demigods, they say, Tvayam bhujaksha kila satvadami samadhi naveshita chetasaike. Cheta eka means same thing, one-pointed attention on Krishna. Then, Tvatpada potena mahatkritena kurvanti govatsa badam vavabdim means Tvatpada potena mahatkritena. Just as we read here, the great souls, like the acharyas, they give us a means by which we can practice devotional service in Silicon Valley or anywhere else and be successful. And that's compared by the demigods to be a boat that can take you across the material world. And as Prabhupada just wrote, when the great acharyas give this boat, they don't take it with them, they leave it for us to get in. But there's something even more amazing about that. Tvatpada potena mahatkritena kurvanti govatsa padam bhavabdim means that the ocean of material nature shrinks when we approach the boat. And how small does it become? About that big, because that's the size of the hoofprint of a calf. And one might think, well, I can never cross the ocean, but if the ocean shrinks to this size, then I can easily step over it. And in the next verse that Prabhupada had translated here and given summary of, the demigods say, Yene ravinakshava muktamaninas toyasta bhavada vashuddha buddhaya aruya krishna parambaram tata patantya tonadritad yushmadangreya. Here they're saying that in order to have sure footing, one must have a relationship with Krishna. Yene avrindaksha vamuktamaninas means that one has to know the lotus-eyed Lord, which means the personality, which means that we have a relationship with the personality of Godhead. And if one doesn't have that relationship, one may imagine that one is liberated, they're saying. But any kind of imaginary liberation that doesn't include one's loving relationship with Krishna is bound to disappoint, because one will fall down from that again. Patantyada. What's more, they say, Ariya Krishna Rampadam Tata, that the hard work, the austerity that you put into achieving your imagined state of liberation, that will be a waste of time. So better to dedicate one's activities, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, and one's senses, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, to serving him and to thinking of him. In the Gita, Krishna says in the 8th chapter that it's important to practice remembering him, because the state of mind that we have when we leave this body will determine where we're compelled to go in our next life. It's a question that Arjuna asks Krishna at the beginning of the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And he wants to know, what is karma? Kim tad karma kamadhyatma. He asks, what is karma? And Krishna answers that it's the force of our own consciousness obligating us to take various bodies in the material world. Krishna explains this science of transmigration, or as many people say, reincarnation, very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita. For instance, in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives a series of verses that describe how it is that we move from one body to the next, and how we can understand what's taking place. He says, Shariram yaravapnoti yachap yukramatishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayar gandham ivashaya. This is an analogy that when the air passes over a particular area of the earth, for instance, a rose garden, the air would pick up the fragrance of the roses. If it passed over maybe some compost, some composting materials, then it might have it will have a different odor. And that's because of its association with that substance. Shariram yaravapnoti yatyap matishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayu gandham ivashayat. And then Krishna says, once we've developed a kind of consciousness because of our association, then the material nature is all accommodating. Shotram chakshu sparshanam cha rasanam granam evacha adishtayam manaschayam vishayana pasevate. There's a way in which material nature is so kind to us that whatever we want, she awards us. So if I've developed a kind of consciousness like, say, our friends the pigs, and the material nature then calculates that you have a desire like a pig, so we'll give you the body of a pig to accommodate that. That's what Krishna is saying, that everything's accommodated. And ukramantam stitam vapi bunjanam vagunanvitam vimudanana pashyanti jnana chakshusha. He uses the word ukrama, which means to step out. So he's saying, at some point, the soul that's in the body will step out. It leaves the present gross material body. And he said, if somebody's trained in Krishna consciousness, then they understand what's taking place. But if not, then they're bewildered by the change. And that's one of the points Krishna makes earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, in the very famous verse, Dehinosmin yata dehe komaran yovaranjara tata dehantara prapti dhiras tatra namuyati. And that is that if one has become dhira, that is sober-minded and can see things as they are, then that person's not disturbed even by the change of body that one has to go through when one leaves the present body. So Yenevra Vindaksha Vamuktamaninas Tvayastabhavadavashudhayudai Budhaya means that the intelligence must become purified, because if one takes some remedial measure but doesn't purify the consciousness, then one's obligated again to cohort with the material nature. However, if one is able to purify the senses by serving Krishna, as is mentioned by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, who gives this very helpful verse about the process of devotional service, where he says, Sarvapari vanir muktam tapratmena nirvalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchite. And that means that devotional service includes using all the senses in Krishna's service. And when you do use your senses in Krishna's service, then they become purified. And when the senses are purified, then they take on their original nature, which is that they all want to engage in Krishna's service. When we engage our senses in sense gratification, then we suffer because we can't actually taste anything through these senses that's eternal. And Prabhupada used to give this example, that if you wrapped gauze around your tongue and then you tried to eat a rasgulla, that would be an approximation of the experience we have in the material world. We can't get any real taste through the material senses. But when they're purified, then, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishaya virivartante nirahasa dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishvandavartate. We can taste something much higher than we're getting here in the material world. And he said, once you've experienced a higher taste, then you immediately forget the lower taste. It's not a matter of restraint anymore. And that's real liberation, when one has something better. Bhakti yoga is experiential. In fact, in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Havi Yogendra says, Bhakti parishanu bhava virakti ranyata traisha trika ekakala prapadya manasya tashnata tushti pushti shud apayonugasam, which means that he's comparing the practice of bhakti yoga to eating. So he says when you eat food when you're hungry, should I have not brought that up? That there's three things that happen. Tushti, pushti, shud, apayo, which means you feel nourishment, satisfaction, and your hunger diminishes. With every morsel that you eat, then your hunger goes away. And in bhakti, when you practice devotional service, when you engage your senses in Krishna's service, then there's a way in which you naturally feel connected to Krishna, bhakti. And anubhava means that you're able to perceive within yourself and within all things that Krishna is there. You see it directly. And finally, he says, virakti anyatra. That anything that's not connected to Krishna, you no longer have an interest in. Just like when you eat food and you're satisfied, if somebody asks you if you want more, have you ever had this experience? You're very hungry, and there's some food that you particularly like, and you take a little bit, then you take a little more, then you're satisfied. Someone is, take more. And he's like, I don't want it anymore. So this is an analogy that one of the Yogendras is giving for when one takes to the practice of devotional service and when senses become purified and when experiences natural happiness that comes from serving Krishna. He said, I'm not interested in anything else, I'm full. But there's one slight nuance to that the acharyas point out. They say that we never become fully satiated by performing devotional service. Any analogy has some point at which it doesn't completely explain this experience. In bhakti, although we're no longer interested in material sense gratification, said still we have an insatiable appetite for Krishna consciousness. And this is one of the signs also of advancing in spiritual practice, is that one's taste for spiritual activities becomes spontaneous. Spontaneous means you don't have to think about it. You just like it. And you go there. No one has to explain to you that it's a good idea if you do this. You don't have to explain it to yourself either. You just like it. And there's a way in which Kriti Sadhya Bhavet Sadhya, that Rupa Goswami says when you start sadhana bhakti, which means the practice of devotional service, you may not have a complete taste for it because the senses still want their kinds of sense gratification and they're not experiencing that ultimate pleasure that I was describing that Krishna says one experiences when one has purified senses. Therefore, in the beginning, Krishna says, Evam buddhi param buddva samsta vyatmanamatmana jahi shatram mahabaho kama rupa durashadam. That one should fortify one's intelligence in the beginning of the practice of devotional service, especially by hearing from the Bhagavad Gita. Because we may not have a taste, but if our intelligence becomes fortified and we develop what is called vivek, or discrimination, about what's good for me and what's not good for me, then I'm able to perform devotional service even if it seems to be perfunctory. That is, I show up to do my chanting, for instance. Those who practice devotional service keep a certain practice, a number of rounds of japa that they chant every day, right? Better say yes. And some days the mind says, I don't like this. Maybe there's something more better, something that I can do that would be more interesting. This is one of the ways one can tell that the mind isn't purified, because it's not spontaneously attracted to chanting Hare Krishna. However, if one continues to practice, then we know from Rupa Goswami, who gives another analysis, he says, what does he say? Set Krishna nama charitari sitapta vidyapito patapta rasanasya rochikanu kintvavarad anudilam kalusaiva justa svatvikramad bhavati tadkara mulahantri. He compares this affliction that chanting Hare Krishna doesn't appeal to me. He says it's like the disease that one gets, which is called, the hope one doesn't get, it's called jaundice. Jaundice creates an overload of bile within one's body. When you see somebody with jaundice, they're yellow because there's so much bile in the system. What's more, another symptom of jaundice is that everything tastes bitter because the bilious secretion that's overwhelming the body is also on the tongue. So when you eat something nice, like I noticed I got a little rise when I said rasgulla earlier. So I'll say rasgulla again. Rasgulla, if you take a rasgulla when you have jaundice, it tastes terrible, even if it's from KC Das in Calcutta. So, hey, that place is bona fide. So, Prabhupada said. So, he gives the example of sugarcane juice. Everyone knows that sugarcane juice is very sweet. And everyone here has probably had the experience on a hot day. You go by, the person grinds it nowadays by machine, and then the juice comes out right from the stalk, and you take a little clay cup, hopefully, and maybe a little lime and some ginger. Sorry. And you take some sugarcane juice. Oh, it's so satisfying because it's so sweet but nutritious at the same time. But if you have jaundice and you drink that, you'll think it tastes terrible. I know people who have had jaundice and have described what it tastes like, but I won't mention that. You can leave it to your imagination. It's repulsive. So why does this come up in a spiritual literature, this analogy by Rupa Goswami? He says, when you have jaundice, one of the curatives is sugarcane juice. Isn't that amazing? It helps you to heal faster from the affliction of jaundice. So he said, just like when you're afflicted with jaundice and you drink sugarcane, you do it at first because the doctor said to do it. You don't care for the taste, but you do it anyway because your intelligence has developed. And gradually, as you drink the sugarcane juice, you start to notice for yourself that it tastes better and better, and finally it tastes sweet as it should. So Rupa Goswami says that it's the same with chanting Hare Krishna. In the beginning, when I chant Hare Krishna, it seems to be not very sweet. But if one continues to chant Hare Krishna as one would do for any medicinal prescription, then gradually one's disease, which is called, and it's a horrible disease, it's called avidya, ignorance. It dissipates, and then one can taste the sweetness of chanting Hare Krishna. This puts one on the safe side of life, where one no longer is interested in material sense gratification. There are various levels of advancement in devotional service which are described by our acharyas. One in particular is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who says, Adau Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangata Bhajana Kriya Tato Narta Nivriti Set Nishta Ruchis Tata. That he says, Adau Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangata Bhajana Kriya Tato Narta Nivriti. So he describes how in the beginning, when we take the devotional service, there's a sense of appreciation for the process. That, oh, this seems like a good idea. And you see others and you admire that they're doing devotional service and you think you'd like to take it up. This is the beginning called Shraddha. And from Shraddha, then one seeks association with devotees. We want to be around devotees and learn from them, hear from them, emulate what they're doing. This is called sadhu sangha. And from sadhu sangha, there's bhajana kriya, which means that one decides to take it seriously, it meaning devotional service. And bhajana kriya might include what Rupa Goswami says, out of 64 items of devotional service are vital for one to move forward. Adau Guru Vashrayam, one accepts shelter of a guru, and then one inquires, asks questions, and one takes initiation vows and says that I'm going to do this with a vow. And as one enters into that, one then finds that there are obstacles on the path of practicing devotional service. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur lists the obstacles. First, he said, is sleep. Not that you can't sleep, everyone should get enough sleep. But he says, when you're doing your chanting, then you suddenly feel sleepy. That's odd, because I wasn't sleepy before, But when you start to chant Hare Krishna, then this, he said, is one of the obstacles to nishta, or steady practice in devotional service. The next obstacle he lists is distraction. He said, you have every intention of chanting, but as soon as you pick up your beads and you start chanting, then your mind thinks of something else that you should do right away. And it usually involves a phone or a computer. There are so many pressing engagements, and the mind then jumps to those things instead of being fixed on finishing one's vow. This is an obstacle. And then he said, there's a state of mind which is an obstacle, which is indifference. You're not sleepy at all. You're not distracted by anything, but you just don't care. And you can't motivate yourself. It's hard to just do it. And this is one of the obstacles that he lists. And then he says that because of our association with the material world for many lifetimes, our senses also are a reservoir of bad qualities. And at first, those bad qualities may manifest themselves in the form of anger or lust or greed, and that becomes an obstacle to our practice of chanting Hare Krishna. The definition of steadiness or nishta bhakti is that one's removed these obstacles from the path of devotional service. So this requires practice. And in the beginning of the day, we heard from His Holiness Giriraj Swami, who quoted from Burijan Prabhu, when someone here had asked about how to chant japa and how to overcome obstacles. Maharaj answered by quoting Burijan. He said, you must enter the fight. He said, you must fight for it. You have to fight for it. That was good advice. Or I should say, I know it was good advice. It was helpful advice. Because one may think that once I start chanting Hare Krishna, then the nectar will start flowing down as if from Niagara Falls. And maybe I'll start rolling on the ground, tears coming from my eyes out of ecstasy. But often what happens when we start chanting Hare Krishna is we start noticing all our anarthas more than we did before. Just like if you've ever tried to, or started, I know you've tried to, we all have clean up your room or your house. Once you start cleaning, you notice there's a lot more than you thought. What's more, the more you clean, you start thinking, well, my curtains are really old anyway, and I need a new bedspread, and this chair, everything looks like it's substandard, and I want to upgrade it. So when we actually take a look at our existential condition, and we take seriously the practice of devotional service, and chanting Hare Krishna, when we become self-observant, we may then notice there's a lot more obstacles than I thought before. But we mustn't worry, because they're no match, says the Srimad Bhagavatam, for the power of the holy name. It's not that anyone is permanently inhibited from practicing pure devotional service. And Prabhupada points this out in his teachings, especially one I'm thinking of now about japa. And he says, the holy name and pure devotional service is equally available to everyone. It's not that somebody has a birthright to it and other people don't. Everybody is eligible, equally so. He said, just like the sun gives light, nourishment, nutrition to everybody. But if you close yourself in a dark room and you pull the curtains, you won't be able to take the benefit of the sun. So similarly, we may have some obstacles when we start to chant Hare Krishna. So it's in the fight to remove these obstacles that we advance in devotional service. And fortunately, we don't have to do all the fighting ourselves. We do have to willfully take up the practice. But if we use our free will to stay with the practice and fight for our advancement, then Krishna will certainly help. As he mentions, or as Sutta Goswami mentions in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the famous verse, which will immediately make you want to follow along when I say it, because it's such a beloved verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and everybody here knows it. Shrinvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana shrityantaksto hyabadrani vidunoti suritsatam. This verse says that when you use your free will to practice hearing about Krishna, then there's a way in which Krishna, as our friend within the heart, helps us to remove these obstacles that keep us from experiencing our relationship with him. And the word used is vidunoti. This word vidunoti means one who helps to purify. And there's a parallel meaning of this in cotton farming. When you pick cotton, it's filled with impurities. There's seeds and there's particles from the plant that get mixed in. How do you remove those? Some ingenious person created a device. I don't know what year. If somebody asked Siri, they could probably find out what year the vidunoti was invented. But it looks like a primitive instrument. It resembles almost a bow, for a bow and arrow. And the way it works is the cotton is placed on the strings of these bows. And then they're vibrated. And once they're vibrated, what year? 1793, says Siri. Then, is there a picture? You don't have to show it to everybody. I just want an eyewitness to say, I'm not making stuff up here. I actually looked it up. It's uncanny that there it is, here. Vidunoti. It works by chords that are vibrated. It creates a certain kind of sound vibration that agitates the cotton, and it causes the heavier particles to fall down. And it leaves the the lighter substance above the cotton. That's vidunoti. Isn't it uncanny that it's in this verse, Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna, and that's a name for Krishna. As Rupa Goswami mentions in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, one of the names for Krishna is Vidunoti. Why? Because when we put ourselves in front of transcendental sound vibration, it vibrates in such a way that Krishna is inclined to take away the obstacles on our path. And we will notice, says the Srimad Bhagavatam, that we're partway there. Have you ever noticed when you're taking medicine of a certain kind that you may have a couple days where you're wondering if this actually works? And then you maybe get to the third day and say, well, I feel a little something. Maybe there's hope. And then there is a day when you're taking the medicine and then you say, it's working for sure. And then you come to full health. Well, there's a series of thoughts that are put together after Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna. The next one is Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki, which says that if you continue chanting and hearing, then you'll come to an interim stage where you're aware that it's starting to work. It hasn't worked completely. There's still some impurity within the heart, but still you notice that I'm getting better. That's a happy day when you're taking medicine for some illness, isn't it? Because first you have to trust the doctor and you have to trust the medicine. You go and you get the best type of advice you can get from the best doctor, isn't it? You don't go and they got their medical degree on YouTube. You find somebody, went to the reputable place, they did their stint in medical school, they've practiced and they know what they're doing. So you have some faith. And then you also ask a little bit about the medicine. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you pick it up at the pharmacy, they'll probably tell you anyway, even if you don't want to know. They'll say, this is what it does. We know pharmacists, they tell us these things. So then you take the medicine and it starts to work. This is nashta prayeshu bhadrishu. Then tada rajas tabo bhava. Tada means tada. It actually means at this time, there's a certain time when you have that tada moment where you say, wow, it worked, tada. Tada rajas tamo bhava kama lubadayasche cheta iter anavidam stitam sattve prasidati. That said at a certain point you'll notice and you'll see very clearly for yourself that the lower qualities that have accumulated in your heart and mind have now been so far diminished that you feel free. Evam prasanna manasa. What's the result of that? How do you feel? How does the patient who's getting better from some particular disease know he or she's getting better? Well, there's a description. Your skin starts to clear up, or whatever the disease might be, like jaundice. You'll notice that you're not yellow anymore. That's one thing. And then he says, Evam prasanna, Sutta Goswami, Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogata, bhagavad tattva vijnana mukta sangha sajayate. This is a stage of advancement in spiritual practice of bhakti where your mind becomes happy. Isn't that nice that this is one of the first symptoms? It's something that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita also when he says, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma. Similar, same actually. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma. When you become spiritual, you already are spiritual, but when you become uncovered from the idea that I'm this body and I'm attached to the material world, this is called asat trishna. I have a thirst for temporary things, which Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, it's him, not me, it's really stupid. Because he says that yehi sam sparshacha bhoga dukkha yoanaya evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. A person, he's more tactful, he says a person who's intelligent doesn't get attracted or attached to things that are temporary because it just causes misery. So Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, when you become spiritual, aware that you're not your body, and you have a clear idea of what the goal of life is, to serve Krishna, and you're inclined towards it, then your mind becomes happy. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, happy for no reason. It's the title of a book. There was an author here when Radha Swami was here. She what? What's her name? That's too hard to say. I can't pronounce it at this time of night. Unless you later give me a rasgulla, maybe I can do. But I never read her book, but I really like the title, Happy for No Reason, because we're naturally happy when we're in our spiritual state, when we're uncovered from the fetters of matter and the worries that come up when I think I'm my body. So there's the way in which when one becomes uncovered, unencumbered by matter, then evam prasana manaso bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tat vijnanam mukta sangha sujayate. There's a way in which one becomes very clearly aware of one's real position in life. And one also knows and sees for oneself that one's become freed from the material condition. And that's the next verse, which says, Vidyate hridaya grantish chidyante sarva samshaya shiyante chasya karamani drishtva eva manishvare. Describes how we have a knot in our heart. If you've ever felt it, if you've been attached to somebody and it didn't work out, or which is pretty much 100%, because one way or another something separates us, even if we're very attached. So there's a way in which we have this knot that binds us to this world, and it appears in the heart, the seat of all our emotion, and we become overwhelmed by these feelings of attachment to the material world. So it's not that one becomes unfeeling, quite the opposite, when one advances in devotional service. It's just that attachment that we naturally have for people and things in this world becomes satisfied, because when we're attached to Krishna and we're bound to Krishna with affection, then we're in our constitutional position. And in that constitutional position, we're naturally happy. So what's being cut is not our tendency to love, but our tendency to love that which doesn't love us back. Vidyate hridaya grantish chidyante. Chidya means to cut. So there's something that's cut, and it's our attachment to the material world. If you've ever been burdened by a debt or by a relationship that you just couldn't shake, or something like that, and then somehow or other, mercifully, it's cut, you suddenly feel free, right? So there's a way in which, at a certain point, by Krishna's mercy, by the practice of our devotional service, we'll be set free. And that way, even when we're in our body, we're still in a material body, we're no longer conditioned by it. We're free, even though we're in the body. This is called Jivan Mukta. And this happens by the practice of devotional service. Some acharyas have compared it to a coconut. If you have any experience with coconuts, you must live in South India or Hawaii. And coconuts are green to start with, but when they dry out, then the inside becomes loose. And similarly, when one is immature in the practice of devotional service, it seems like we're our bodies. But when we dry out our material desires by the practice of devotional service, we transfer our affection to Krishna. And there's a way in which we start to see the difference quite naturally between ourself and our bodies and minds. And we become liberated even while we're in this life. One who's liberated even in this life, then upon leaving the present material body, doesn't take birth again in this material world, but is accommodated, as Krishna accommodates through his material nature every living being according to his or her desire. He similarly accommodates all those who have heartfelt desire to serve him. And there are different modes in which people want to serve Krishna. Itam satam brahma sukhanabhutya dasyam katanam paradaivatena mayashritanam naradarakena sakamvraja rukrita punya punjaha. Some people are attracted only to one aspect of Krishna, which is called the Brahman effulgence. From Krishna emanates all energies, and one of the energies that comes from Krishna, or as an aspect of Krishna, which is all-pervading, as is Krishna himself, is his effulgence, which is creative. Yasya prabha prabhabato jagananda koti koteshva shesha vasudari vibhuti binam tad brahma nishkalamanantam ashesha bhutam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. And for those who are attached to the impersonal aspect of the Lord, Krishna gives facility for them to be merged into that effulgence. For those who have a sense of Krishna's grandeur as the supreme master of everyone, for instance, in Vaikuntha, Vaikuntha Loka is an aspect of the spiritual world. As described in the Rama Samhita, Goloka namni nijadamni taleta tasadevi mahesha haridama suteshu teshu te te prabhava nichaya vihitascha yena govindamadi purusham tamaham. It's a little bit of explanation of where we are. Lowest of all is located Silicon Valley. No, just kidding. Devi Dham. Devi Dham is what's ruled over by Maya Devi herself. Above that is Shiva's abode. Above Shiva's abode is the abode of Vaikuntha, where is Lord Narayan. He has his grandeur, and the devotees there worship him with reverence. But above that, there's Goloka Vrindavan. This is called the topmost planet in the spiritual world. And there's a different mode of worship there. The devotees in Goloka Vrindavan have unceremonious love. It means they don't see Krishna as God, because as we know from Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, he was a friend of Krishna's. But at the onset of the Battle of Kurukshetra, when Krishna had a discussion with Arjuna, and Arjuna turned to Krishna and he said, let's not be friends for now. I'm going to accept you as a spiritual master. And you please teach me. What happens in the 11th chapter of the Gita? Krishna shows his universal form to Arjuna. And Arjuna's response is, oh, I made so many offenses to you, being your friend. We used to hang out. And I used to make jokes at your expense. See, this is friendship. When you're friends with somebody, you can make a joke at their expense and then you both laugh. But when you say, oh, my friend is actually God, as Arjuna said, I was like, I'm really sorry. I didn't know. And there's this kind of separation. The friendship starts to be suppressed. So in Goloka Vrindavan, there's a way in which there's a kind of love where the devotees don't see Krishna as God at all. In fact, his friends play with him and they wrestle. When we're, for instance, if you go to any temple, you have to be very careful. South India, Udupi, you can't wear a shirt, you got to wear a chadar. You have to, there's protocols, like even when you go to see Venkateshwar, there, last time I was there, it said, hurry through, they're going to push you through anyway. So I got there all the way to the front of the line after we waited 2 hours. And as soon as I got up there, I thought, I'll be dutiful and I'll just keep going. So the Pujari grabbed me and he held me and he said, see God. I said, okay, I'm seeing God. And then I started to move again. He said, no, see God. And there's this sense of reverence. There is God. But in Goloka Vrindavan, there's no sense of reverence at all. In fact, this is what we call Krishna at home. He's not at the office. He's home with his family. You know when you go home with your family, you don't want to talk business. You don't want to see any of your business associates. You don't want to take any phone calls. You just want to be there and be yourself. So Vrindavan is Krishna being himself. And natural love of Vrindavan. That's a kind of result of practicing devotional service as was given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, many types of people come to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the practice of devotional service, and whatever kind of inclination they have to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whether they're more attracted to Ramchandra, or they may be more attracted to Vaikuntha rather than Vrindavan, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accommodates everyone. But the predominance of devotees who approach Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu aspire to Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual world. And all this can be attained by following in the footsteps of the disciples of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called the Six Goswamis, who have left behind a very clear process by which one may worship Krishna in a certain mood, and by that, when one leaves this mortal coil that we're now held by, and has a sentiment in one's heart for Krishna in a certain way. For instance, in this example, for Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan, then that desire is accommodated by Krishna, who takes us back to the spiritual world. So Janmashtami is a time in which one may regather one's purpose. It's said in a book I read by a pastor who has a very successful, he retired, but he had a very successful congregation in Southern California. I went to visit it. He said, unless you remind yourself and everyone else in your group every 30 days what your mission is, then everyone goes off in different directions. Because the world is pulling us, our minds are pulling us, and we may forget our purpose in life. It's very easy to do. So Janmashtami is a good time to renew our sense of purpose. I was going to say urgency, and I think I will, because there is a kind of urgency that we have a very temporary situation we're in now. In fact, the poet Jayadev, I believe, said, Kamala Dala Jala Jivana Talamala, which means that we're kind of like a little drop of water on a lotus leaf. And those who know lotuses and have watched water bead up on a lotus, you know that it's not stable at all. It can roll off at any time. So he said, our life can end any moment. And the main purpose of our lives is to develop love for Krishna. It's to make spiritual advancement. We don't want to be caught halfway there. We know stories in the Bhagavatam of Bharat Maharaj. He made a lot of spiritual advancement, but he got distracted in his practice in a dramatic way, which obligated him to take birth as a deer in his next life. And boy, was he sorry about that, because he remembered how far along he was. In the next life, he took birth as Jad Bharat. Jad means dead to the world. Like Jada Bhuti means you got no intelligence. Jad Bharat means he didn't have one scintilla of attraction anymore for the material world because of what he had been through. So this is the progression of the successful soul to come to the human form of life. Labvam sadurlabam idam bahusambhavante manushyamartanam anityam apihadira. Krishna says in the Bhagavatam that it's so rare, the opportunity to get a human form of life. Labam sadurlabam, it's sudurlabam. You don't get this very easily. You can't put in for it. Doesn't matter if you have $1 billion. You can't say, I would like another human body. And by the way, how about Cupertino? Doesn't work that way. You go to any far-flung place, you have no idea where you're going to go in your next life. So that's why Krishna is saying, Labam sadurlabam idam bahusambhavan manushya martanam anityam apihadira. He said, this is temporary arrangement, this human form of life. He said, so the smartest of all are those who can take this temporary arrangement that's been made and parlay it into something eternal. And that's what spiritual practice does. People sometimes think, oh, well, take time, make money first, later on worry about spiritual life. This is backwards. Prahlad Maharaj said, Komara acharat pragno dharmam bhagavatamiha. Start when you're Komara, when you're a little child. Because just like investing, if you start when you're young, compounded interest, you know the story, you'll be a millionaire by the time you're 30. So same thing with spiritual practice. Start as soon as possible, start young, and practice every day, because you want to transfer the temporary arrangement you have into an eternal arrangement. And if you miss the opportunity, it's the greatest loss. So that's why we hold this temple open, this space. This space is to give everyone an opportunity to come here and get information. For instance, we're an informational center. If you come here on any given day of the week, you'll find that our parking lot is full of pallets of books. Last year, we distributed over $1 million worth of books in Silicon Valley. And those books we take very seriously, because we're talking about Bhagavad Gita, arguably the most important spiritual book in the entire world. There's nothing as clear and concise as the Bhagavad Gita. What to speak of the fact it's directly spoken by God himself. There are many other spiritual literatures in the world which we also revere and respect, but they're spoken thousands of years after the fact. They're spoken by other people, representatives and so forth. Bhagavad Gita is spoken by Bhagavan. He's speaking for himself. That's an important message for the world to have. And also, this temple is meant for Sangha. Just like all day today, aren't we all so happy because we're here sitting with one another? What are we doing here anyway? It's almost midnight. All we care about is seeing Krishna together, right? That's satsang. And we have to have satsang because when we have association, Krishna says, Purusha prakritisto hi bhunkte prakriti jan gunan, karanam gunasangosya sarasad yoni janmasu. Whoever you associate with, you'll pick up the qualities of. I didn't like that sentence. I'm going to do it again. When you associate with people, you take on their qualities, period. Krishna says, Karanam guna sangosya, the cause of your sat and asat, all your good and bad qualities or situations in life, or your existential situation in general, is all because of the way that you've associated with yourself. So we keep these doors open and this infrastructure here, which we purchased 12 years ago, and now we're looking to expand because obviously we're bursting at the seams. So we're taking steps towards developing more facility in Silicon Valley. We feel that the Bay Area is the most ripe for those who are interested in spirituality. California itself is a very open-minded place. A lot of spiritual seekers here. What to speak of Silicon Valley? I grew up here in the Bay Area, and I've always had a dream to have a splendid center and full facility all over Silicon Valley so that the good people here could come and take advantage of it. Those from all cultures can come together and take advantage of Bhagavad Gita. Those who speak all different languages can come and read Bhagavad Gita in their own language and take up the practice of bhakti yoga for themselves. It's a universal process. It's not a religion. It's not sectarian. It's meant for the soul. And everyone's a soul in a body somewhere. So we're so thankful to all of you for making this your destination today. It's the numbers I'm hearing outside, which was actually over 2 hours ago, over 10,000 people have come already today. And I mean, that was 2 hours ago, so you're all still coming in. So it's very heartfelt to be with all of you and to have this opportunity that we all get to chant together. And now in about 11 minutes, we'll have our midnight artik. We're going to stand up for the artik because we can fit more people that way. We've calculated. And we'll have a kirtan. And afterwards, actually, I don't even know what's happening. Why am I even saying? Does somebody want to tell me what's happening? There's prasadam? You get all this and prasadam too? Well, I guess it's a case in point. Krishna's so kind. He gives us association, he gives us prasadam, everything. Anyway, it's such a delight to see all of you, to be with you. I thank you all day. I've seen some of you sitting here for 10 hours today. It's just, there's a bond we have here. So even if you can only come once a year, please keep coming. If you can come more frequently, we have so many programs. I'm sure you all saw them as you walked in. We're a developing community, and there's so many good people here, really smart and dedicated. So if you want to come here and join in, we're on the move. We're going to do big things here in Silicon Valley, and we would love your help if you want to be part of it, making history here in America. We would like to make a shining example for the world of what Krishna consciousness can look like when it's done with service in mind. So since nobody's come forth to tell me the schedule, I'm going to guess, which is not too hard. We're going to have an artik ceremony. So in about 3 or 4 minutes, we'll stand up and position ourselves so we can be there for the 12 o'clock midnight artik, the time that Lord Krishna appears in Mathura from Devaki, and then Krishna takes baby all the way to Vrindavan and Gokula, and supposedly trades him out for the girl. As many of you might have heard Giriraj Maharaj's lecture earlier, there's a lot more to the story, but it's too late now. So, dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsingadev, on this day of your birthday, Janmashtami, so desire, please empower us all here in Silicon Valley. We may work together as one community to help expand the great teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and the process of Bhakti Yoga to all the people of Silicon Valley. Let us build a shining community here that will expand all over the Bay Area and give people an opportunity to take advantage of the rare human form of life. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. And as we like to say at the end of any program, we offer our respects to everyone. Vansha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhabhevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo. So we have a lot in this room here. Let's just try to make, anyway, most of you are from India. You've been to big temples, and you know what it feels like to be at a big event, so don't mind. If you get jostled, that's part of the program, right? So we'll stand up and be friendly with one another and get a position ready for our evening artik.